Now that we have the ability to log in and log out a user, it's time to actually create a user required page, or really a login required page. And this article create view is a perfect candidate for that. We only want logged in users to have the ability to create articles. So how do we actually go about doing this? Now, you might already have an intuition about it. You might come in here and say if the request.user.is_authenticated, then you could maybe do all of this stuff. Or we could say the opposite of that and say if not authenticated, we could return a redirect to make them log in. And this is fine, this works, but we're going to be repeating those two lines over and over again. So luckily, Django actually has a built-in way to essentially handle this right here. So what we want to do is get rid of that, and we're going to go ahead and import a decorator called login required. So we're going to do from django.contrib.auth.decorators. We're going to import login required. Now, in this case, what you want to remember is the fact that there is a decorator called login required. So when in doubt, if you run into issues or you forget what login required is, you can just type out Django login required and decorator, something like that. And you will certainly see this in the Django documentation, and it's really easy to find, in my opinion, of just typing out login required. And there it is right there. And so to grab where it's located, oftentimes they'll give you an example of that. So do that from time to time just so you can get familiar with where things are in the code and in the documentation. And most of the time, if you actually select this little paragraph tag here, you can hit that. And what it'll do is in the URL, you'll actually see the entire path to that item. And so like this, that's what you'll see. And you can actually do from django.contrib.decorators import login required. Now, the reason I'm telling you that is because you shouldn't try to memorize these things. You should just try and remember contextually what it is that you're trying to do, and then do a Google search to come up with it. Memorizing things is, well, I don't think it's worth it until you have a really solid foundation of Django. Anyways, with that out of the way, let's go ahead and actually use this decorator now. And that's using the @, pasting that decorator in, saving this. And then we want to make sure that our user, let's see if they're even logged in. It looks like they're logged in right now. So I'm going to go ahead and log out this user and say, yes, log out. And then now I'm going to try and go into it as if I wasn't already logged in. So articles/create, I hit enter. And notice it tries to redirect me to a page that's not found. Now, what we see here is articles/login. Now, this is a default that Django settings has. So you can go to Django settings module and look at Django settings here and look for the login URL. In this case, it's not showing it. So let's go ahead and just do Django settings module login URL. And this will give you all of the different settings in here. So if we search for a login URL, sure enough, there it is. Okay, so why did I show you this? Well, it's important to know that there's other configurations on here that you could absolutely go through, such as login URL and login redirect. Now, in our case, we want that login URL because of this login required. So let's go ahead and actually handle the login URL. And so inside of my settings, you can put it pretty much anywhere, but just go ahead and do login_URL and put in the actual path that we have been using, which is simply just login. Now, of course, we can also just change our login path to accounts/login, much like it did here, because that's what the default is. But I haven't been using that. I think just /login is a lot easier to remember. So that's what I end up using most of the time. But now that we've got that, it's now time to try this again to the articles path. And again, articles create, we hit enter. Notice that it's taking me to log in. Now, of course, it's also giving me this next option here. So if I actually do log in, it's not actually redirecting me to that next URL. Now, part of the reason for this is the fact that in my actual views, we don't have a way to handle any get parameters. That next part was a get parameter. The other part is a security measure. Because if somebody put next equals to, like, let's say in their get params, we said something like next equals to, I don't know, http://www.google.com, then we want to prevent something like that from happening. So I'm just going to omit it altogether. It is something that's pretty easily handled, but it takes a few steps to get there. And I think it's outside the context of where we are right now. Now we're at a good place to start talking about actual Django forms to limit the amount of times we need to do stuff like this and repeating ourselves over and over, not just in the view, but also in the template. So let's go ahead and look at that.